Okay, so I was really excited to make today's video because today I'm going to be talking about emergency preparedness and getting ready for an emergency. You might think, well, what does that have to do with living in a car? So I think this video can be helpful if you live in a car, live in a house, or if you're just going camping. So where I live is called King County, and our county was handing out these packets at the local grocery store. And so I thought this would be a good time to go over what is in the packet. Now, some of the things that they were handing out for free were, let's see, I've got a flashlight, a whistle, and they were also handing out the fire extinguishers, not like a full-size one, but one that's like the size of like a deodorant spray can. And I think those can all be very helpful. Like I said, if you're in a car and there's a fire, if you're in a house, you're in a fire, you're at a campsite, and there's a fire. One of the first things I noticed is they gave me this plastic bag. The plastic bag is supposed to be what you put your important documents in. And I do want to talk about that because obviously people will say, well, if you have important documents, just get a safety deposit box at the bank. But sometimes you need to actually travel with your documents, like if you have car insurance or something like that. And they usually tell you to put it in a plastic bag to keep it safe from getting wet or damaged. Now, I can remember a time when they used to say to keep your important documents in your freezer in your house. And if there's ever a fire, then all those documents are going to be saved inside the freezer. But one thing I've noticed is when I put documents in my freezer, all the moisture inside the freezer like ruin my documents. Do what you can if you're trying to keep important documents somewhere. If you can keep them in a plastic bag, or if you can just, I've seen where you can buy a safe that is both waterproof and fireproof, about the size of a shoebox. You can usually buy something like that at Walmart. You can keep your important documents there. Now I'm gonna also go over what is some other stuff that they have in here, in this emergency kit. That's really more like you build your own kit. So I think a lot of us know, common sense. If you know something's gonna happen and you're going to be, like I mentioned before, in a hurricane and you're not gonna be able to get to the grocery store because everything's gonna shut down for possibly a week, you should always have I think stockpile some water, some drinking water, have that on hand. So even if you're traveling in a vehicle and you live in your vehicle, there's been a lot of stories about people traveling in the desert, going to Death Valley. You should always have some water in your car or have some water stored somewhere for an emergency. Now, this sort of thing they gave me, I guess, was like a shopping list. And I'm just gonna go over some of the stuff that's on this shopping list. There's this piece of paper that's telling you things you might need in an emergency. And so they mentioned just having some food on hand, non-perishable, because if it needs to be refrigerated, obviously power goes out, your food is gonna spoil. If you happen to need scissors, I'm not sure, maybe scissors, knife, something like that. We already talked about water. They do say to have like a lighter or matches. I guess a bag to carry everything in. Of course, that makes sense. For some reason, there's a separate item here that says you should have canned food, but I feel like that kind of goes with the rest of the non-perishable food. This does say sanitizing wipes. If that's something you can't have or you don't want to use or is too expensive, I mean, obviously you can get hand sanitizer, some kind of soap, paper towels, something to clean up with, because the whole thing is if you don't have access to water, which could be your water's been shut off or you're traveling on the road, you do still want to have a way to keep your hands clean before you eat anything. Keep your hands clean, like you blow your nose, you got snot all over the place, you want to keep your hands clean. This says to have pain reliever, so aspirin, Tylenol, whatever you can take. Eye wash happens to be on here. I haven't had a situation where I needed to have eye wash, but it's on here. So let's go over some more of this stuff that's on this list. Things to have on hand in case of an emergency. And like I said, some of these things might just be things you pack if you're gonna go on a trip, a road trip, or you're gonna be out camping for a week. Okay, so personal hygiene items, toilet paper. I already talked about having maybe some tools or a pocket knife. This does mention to keep cash with you. So, even though you might have all your money in a bank account on your ATM, if you don't have access to an ATM or a business doesn't take credit card for whatever reason, always good to have a little bit of cash on you. I always say don't keep too much cash on you if you're traveling because, you don't want to get robbed and have all your money stolen. This says to have duct tape, pet supply. So if you have a pet, one thing I've always been told, like if you live in a house or an apartment, you have a pet, that to always keep your pet carrier right by the front door in case there's an emergency and you have to just run out the door. Obviously, you're not going to have time to climb up in the attic and look for your pet carrier that you stored away. So you should always have it out and ready to go. If there's any medications that you take, make sure you have whatever you need for, you know, an emergency. Then having phone chargers. So I say phone charger, like having an extra plug, an extra cord, extra backup battery, where it's like a battery bank that you have to charge up the bank and then you can charge your phone into the bank. Let's see, having warm clothes. So of course, obviously it's middle of the summer, not something you think about, but you know, always having maybe like a jacket, a sweater, or a blanket if you know, you never know when it's gonna be suddenly cold and you weren't expecting it. Making sure you have sturdy shoes and socks. I already mentioned a flashlight. This says to have a portable radio. I know a lot of times people can just use their phone for everything. And so I don't know how many people actually keep a portable radio that you're gonna listen to the radio for a news alert or something like that. Fire extinguisher, I already mentioned. Having a can opener, I don't know how important that's gonna be. Can opener, bottle opener. Some cans already come with like a pull tab on it, so you don't really need a can opener. I guess that depends if you think you'll need it. Hand sanitizer, medical supplies, I don't know, like Band-Aids or something like that might be helpful to have. And then of course you've got all your identification and important documents, which is where we're at with this bag here, making sure you have all that. So now that I went over the shopping list, I'll kind of go over the plastic bag that King County gave me. And it has a list of things, and not everything on here is going to apply to your living situation. So depending on what area of the country you're in, you know, some people live in an area where there's earthquakes, some people live in an area where there's tornadoes, and some people live in an area where you have to worry about hurricanes. So depending on where you live, this says to have all these emergency documents ready for your emergency kit. Now, this is mentioning insurance policy information. So however that applies to you, whatever insurance you may have, car insurance, homeowner's insurance, whatever the situation is. Let's see. Then it also says to have, well, this is interesting. It says to take photos of your property. Now, I, for some reason, have always kept a photo of my license plate number on my phone because I thought in case for some reason someone asked, what's your license plate? I already know it, I have it memorized, but I always just keep a photo of it for some reason in case I blank out and forget. But maybe having a photo of your car. So I don't know if your car got stolen and the police want to know, well, what did the car look like? So if you have photos of things that are important that, you know, in case something happens, you can refer back to the photo. Let's see. On here, it says to always have emergency contact numbers. And I think I'm going to go over that on another piece of paper I have here. But yes, okay, so most of us, we keep our phone numbers saved in our phone and we don't really have them written down anywhere because they're gonna always be on our phone. Well, if your phone dies, then you kind of need to know what those phone numbers are if you don't have them memorized. So phone numbers of your work, like you need to call your job and tell them that you're gonna be late, your phone died, you slept in, the alarm on your phone didn't wake you up. You know, just having a phone number that you can refer to in an emergency if your phone isn't working for some reason and you need to borrow someone else's phone. It's going to have these important numbers written down. So your work, your family, friends, other contacts that you might need to get a hold of. Okay, so then also it says, let's see. Oh, give me a minute while I read this. I don't know how important it is for you to be traveling around with your birth certificate because that might be something you keep in a safe deposit box at a bank, but if you could keep a photocopy of some of these important documents, that may be helpful in the long run. Let's see. It also says pictures of family members. Now, I'm going to assume this is, say you're out camping and you're traveling with your family, small child, and someone gets lost on a trail and you need to call the park service and say, hey, this person's been off on the trail. They haven't come back to our meeting point. And then, of course, having a photo, an up-to-date photo of what they look like so you can get a description out of them would be helpful. Like I said, we're not going over worst case scenario here, but it is good to just have this stuff on hand as, you know, to prepare for an emergency. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. Doesn't mean the worst is going to go wrong, but it just makes you feel better knowing that you're prepared and you have all this information. There's also saying that if you for some reason need to travel with your immunization records, and it also refers to for your pets. So I know sometimes when you travel, you do need that information, but also pets, like if they've had their rabies shots, you might want to keep a record of that somewhere. A list of any sort of prescriptions that you're taking, and even including what glasses or contacts, keeping that prescription somewhere. And back to our important critical documents, meaning your identity, so your driver's license, your passport, something like that, any of your credit or debit card information. Sometimes people also keep a list of important passwords somewhere, and like your checking account number, something like that, that you want to keep somewhere. Now obviously you want to keep this somewhere safe where someone isn't going to see it, or someone isn't going to steal this information, so just keep that in mind. Let's see, also it mentions like your vehicle title, anything that you own, like say you're driving an RV, having like paper strip that shows that you own that RV, and military records, so if you have military ID or anything like that having to do with the VA. And let's see, that seems to be the end of that list. So the other thing they gave me was kind of like this little booklet, and it's called, you know, to be prepared, build a kit. And it's, the idea is that you'll keep a backpack that maybe you just keep it by your front door, so in case you have to run out the front door, there's an earthquake or whatever the issue is, and you got to get out of your house fast and there's a fire, that you have your emergency backpack ready. And some of the things that it talks about in here is, of course, to gather all your emergency information. Now on here they give me a piece of paper, and it does say to, you know, fill out the paper and put all the important phone numbers and information that you're going to need to refer to. And there's a whole booklet here that you can fill out, and all of it's gonna, you know, it's gonna be pertinent to where you live. So if you have to write down the phone number of your local police, your local fire department, things like that, of course you can always call 911. But if you have a local number that you want to refer to for certain issues, like your local school that you need to contact for anything. So basically this little booklet that they gave us, it does have some instructions here of what to do during an earthquake, because I do live in an area where we have to worry about earthquakes. And so there's a whole big instruction thing on here of how to, you know, get under a table, or to, let's see, what to do for first aid, what to do if there happens to be a natural gas break or something like that. Okay, so let me get back to some of these things we already went into, the things that you want to put in your emergency backpack. And of course, we've got some water. Again, water is always important. Non-perishable food, medication, any medical equipment. So, okay, when I say medication, say you have asthma, well, okay, sometimes people on asthma, they need to carry around an inhaler, or they have some other breathing device that they need to use. First aid kit, making sure that you have extra batteries. I mean, I keep referring to a cell phone, but sometimes we have other devices that need to use batteries to work properly. Having some spare clothes. Now, it keeps referring to warm clothes, meaning keeping a jacket or something like that. I always think it's important to have some extra socks and underwear. I don't think that's anywhere on these lists, but sometimes that is something that is important. You don't know when you're going to be stuck somewhere a little bit longer than you expected, and you're not going to have a change of clothes, but it's good to have some extra socks and underwear. Okay, having a flashlight, personal hygiene items, which they refer to, you know, like a toothbrush, a hairbrush, things like that. You might want to keep some spare tools. I personally, I don't, let's see if I have it here. On just my keychain, I actually have a whistle, and the whistle is good for, you know, like I said, if you're out hiking, you get lost on the trail, you can whistle for help instead of screaming for help. But I also have these things that have little screwdrivers. So you have the flathead and the Phillips head screwdriver. I have these, and I always carry these with me for just spare tools. Let's see. It does say to have a fire extinguisher, some toilet paper, pet supplies if you have pets. And let me go over anything else that I've missed here. Creating, you know, creating a plan basically with your friends and family, having a way to call for help, call people that you know. Let's say there is an emergency. Well, if you know you had to call like 10 different people, that's a lot to deal with. So maybe you have like a tree of people that you call one person and they'll call the next person and get the information out. And let's see, I'll go over one last thing here and then we'll wrap up this video. I really appreciate that you've been watching. We talked about filling out this booklet, and the booklet they gave me is putting down all your emergency contacts, phone numbers, emails, that sort of thing. And I already talked about putting down fire station information, the police station information, and I don't know, some of the stuff on here, I mean, it's mentioning writing down different alternative routes to take, what your local medical facility is, Now, as far as routes to take, I'm assuming this means, like, say the street where you live, they've shut down some street, there's been a big accident, and now you got to get to work and you're going to be late and you got to find another way to get there. So once again, you probably get on your GPS on your phone and it's going to tell you what route you can take. I can remember a time, and this is so bizarre that I just now thought of this. I can remember a time I get up in the morning, get myself all ready, give myself enough time to get there, and the GPS was not working on my phone. And I was like, well, now how in the world am I going to find where this job is at? Other than, I got to go on a computer, use MapQuest or some website that'll give me directions, print out the directions, keep a piece of paper with me and take the directions with me. It turned into such an ordeal that, of course, I was going to be late for the interview at that point because I was just expecting to hop in my car, type it into the GPS and go. And that's not what ended up happening. So when it's telling you that you should plan out alternative routes, I'm assuming that means that maybe ahead of time you kind of get to know your area a little bit better. And if you're going to be traveling on the road, which a lot of my videos are going to be geared towards, is living out of your car, traveling on the road. Just because the GPS says take this way to get there, you might need to figure out some other ways to get to certain locations, because sometimes accidents happen, they shut down the road for construction, whatever the issue is, and you're going to need to find a new route. So it is interesting that they do put that in here for preparing for an emergency. And that does seem to be how I'm going to wrap up the video today, and I do appreciate you watching.